It is Friday, March 14th. I want to make sure I say that. I think I forgot in the last handful of clips from the video I did previously, but kind of gloomy out today, but doesn't have to be gloomy in here, talking about some cool stuff. So I think this will be the start of the third video for the channel, which is exciting, and I want to get a little bit more into discussion of ideas and topics and theology and those sorts of things instead of just about me or what I'm doing developing out this channel and probably other channels going forward where I do more specifically nothing about me. But I can at least start to ideate and flesh out some of my thoughts and ideas on here and then transfer them into more, I don't know, sedentary or more concrete, maybe is the better way to say it, more concrete videos to put out into the public. But I listened to an awesome YouTube video this morning. Gospel Simplicity is one of my favorite channels. If I've not mentioned that before or cited it, I highly recommend you go over and follow them. I believe the gentleman's name is Austin, but he's down in Maryland. I'm in Pennsylvania, so maybe someday I'll get to catch up with him. He's got, I think, already 1 or 2 theology degrees and then is continuing to study beyond that. For some masters, I don't know how many, but it's very impressive. You know, I do a lot of lay study on my own and I am saving for seminary, but I'll never catch up with that pace of formal education. Anyway, he put out a really awesome video on Justin Martyr this morning, and it was on the idea of philosophy and its interface with Christianity and true philosophy and all these kind of things. And it really refreshed a thing that I think about a lot, an idea I think about a lot, a conversation I have pretty regularly with people who maybe have never studied any philosophy, which I did in college and have read a good bit on my own since then. But he was discussing how a lot of Christians throughout history have maybe written off philosophy because of the scripture that talks about ignoring vain philosophies, and people have tended to interpret that over history, at least certain people, as all philosophy is vain, when really it's that there are some philosophies that are vain. I talk about a concept a lot and think about a concept a lot of there's really no such thing in life as neutrality, and that applies across every paradigm I can think of. So I have some friends who are really passionate that if you're a Christian, you should be uninvolved in politics, but the way that I understand and define politics is the practical interface between ideas of how humans should live and then the praxis of us making those things into laws and establishing what are societal standards for living. And when you tell somebody, for instance, not to engage in the political process, that is actually a political move and decision you're making inherently. You can't be politically neutral. It's the same thing with philosophies and ideas. When you do theology, it is a form of philosophy that is recognizing the reality of God. Philosophy is thoughtful analysis of reality and existence, and there's all sorts of facets of it. Epistemology, which is one I'm really passionate about and I point a lot of believers to especially, is the study of how we can know what we know and how we can know truth and to what extent that's possible. That's kind of, to me, at the fundamental level under every sort of analysis we do when we're then looking at like logic, which is kind of tied in. Again, I may have mentioned this in the previous video, but I have a book I want to write along this kind of architecture of how I think about the framework of thinking. But you have these presuppositions, these assumptions that we can know truth to any extent and that we're somehow able to define it, and that there's mechanisms for analyzing that, deductive, inductive, and abductive reasoning, and that there's logic tied to that, which is a metaphysical concept you have to presuppose. So that fact that there's logical things that can be worked out deductively, and then that there's logical fallacies that are considered invalid arguments, so on and so forth. From there, you're able to kind of establish what reality is to some level. But then we have other things more specifically in Christian theology and tradition that we have to work out downstream of that. I also mentioned prolegomena in last video or the one before, but this idea of there's also these fundamental skills that we have and fundamental information we have upstream of theology and Christian thinking. So you have to know a language. You have to be able to interpret that language and comprehend that language, and that deals with elements like translation. There's scholarship that goes into how your Bible was made. If you're a person who thinks that scholarship is inherently this wicked, liberal, progressive thing, you wouldn't have a Bible without it, because it would all be in Greek, Hebrew, and Aramaic, and you couldn't read it unless you went and learned how to translate yourself, which is still a form of scholarship. So again, there's like no neutrality in any of these things, is kind of the fundamental underlying principle and point that I'm making. Everything is intentional and everything has an element where you're engaging on a spectrum, even if you want to call it good and bad. You're on that spectrum. So same thing, back to this video from Gospel Simplicity this morning with philosophy. I believe that all these elements of thought qualify as philosophy. So this video that he did on the true philosophy, as Justin Martyr calls it, and how he had to engage with the Roman Empire at the time that he was alive to kind of combat the idea that Christianity was only a foolish religion. They thought we were atheists because we didn't believe in the Roman gods, which is, again, this kind of tribal assumption that if you don't believe in our gods, you don't believe in any gods. Silly things like that. And then also, again, the idea that there is no real reasonable or logical element behind Christianity. Anybody who's studied apologetics, which is a huge passion of mine, would know better than that today. But he was making that case and argument back in his day. So I was really, really excited about that video. It got me pretty fired up and got my mind rolling on some of these ideas. But that's something that I'm hoping more of the church will do and engage with, and it's what I try to incorporate in teaching in our small group, what I'm going to be putting into videos and things like this, and walking through really wrestling with and grappling with the fact that we are limited beings, and there's a certain extent to which we're not going to understand everything perfectly. You know, you want to talk about a really complex element of philosophy and theology like the Trinity, and while it is reasonable to be able to explain the Trinity and demonstrate it from Scripture, even though that exact word triunity or Trinity isn't in Scripture. It was a descriptive term developed later in church history. It's still clearly in Scripture, I would argue, and so not too hard to explain. But if somebody were to ask us the mechanism of how are there three persons in one being that are co-eternal and of the same essence and all these things, I don't think we can ever comprehend that on this side of eternity, if ever. That might be something that's just beyond our finite understandings, again, on this side of eternity at least. I don't know if God will ever expand our minds enough to be able to grasp and understand that when we're transfigured and living in the New Jerusalem and whatnot. So, but this whole point for me, the church that my wife and I attend is charismatic. I think would be probably how most people would describe it colloquially. You know, we're continuationists, not necessarily charismatic, because there's a lot of baggage with that term and certain practices people assume, and all of a sudden they think you're tied to such and such network and whatnot, and that's not really the thing for us. You know, again, scripturally, we believe gifts continue and other sorts of elements like that. And we believe there's obviously an unseen realm reality. I'm a huge fan and student of Dr. Michael Heiser's work, who unfortunately passed away a few years ago. I was blessed to be able to attend his funeral because it was in Pennsylvania where I live. But all those things being said, sometimes from pulpits at our church or otherwise in churches that I watch online on YouTube, or if we've ever gone with a friend to some of these churches, there's sometimes this real anti-scholarship or anti-thoughtful atmosphere or attitude, even if it's unintentional or like in people's subconscious. But the idea that you can get away from these things, or that there's an element of neutrality where you can be purely spiritual or purely whatever, I think is just an oversight as to what kind of reality God really truly created. We're to love God with all our heart, soul, mind, and strength, and or body, depending on the different translations. But the idea is your mind's incorporated in there, and you can't get away from those things. And same thing, there's all sorts of stuff that Scripture doesn't tell us. It even tells us that it doesn't tell us everything about life, right? There's a whole history of Jesus's youth that's not captured and not listed out in Scripture. And there's the part in the Bible where it talks about if everything that Jesus did while he was walking on the earth was captured, it would have filled up more than all the books in the world at the time. So there were all these elements. It tells us objectively it doesn't capture everything, but it does capture what's sufficient for our righteousness and for salvation, the message of the gospel and those sorts of things. And similarly, then there's other things we have to figure out using things like philosophy and logic and reasoning and applying these eternal, truthful scriptural principles into things like, who's your spouse going to be? You have to make that kind of decision. Who do you want to commit yourself to based on these scriptural principles? But it's not like you can read somewhere in scripture, hey, Joe, you're going to marry Trisha, and it's going to be in this way at this date or time or place or any of that kind of thing. It gives you some guidance in, say, Proverbs 31 of the type of godly woman you should be looking for. And then we believe, again, that you can pray and the Holy Spirit can speak to you and give you guidance in more real time, more applicable to your direct life of maybe not that person, maybe this person, there's some good signs, or otherwise you feel at peace about a thing or not. So anyway, I don't want to go on too much of a tirade and get too granular in some of these thoughts when I'm doing this style of kind of vlog material, because I want to focus on those down the line, whether it's on this channel or another channel, getting more into scripture, having a lot more concrete citations and sourcing and things like that for these thoughts, and eventually what'll be arguments for positions, of course. But that's kind of what got me really excited and fired up this morning, just that refreshing of the idea of, hey, there is no neutrality in these things. You're always engaging on some level with a pre-existent reality. When you're doing any level of thinking, even if it's theological, you're doing philosophy, even if you hate that. And gospel simplicity again, Austin. I'd love to meet you someday. I think your work's great, and I really appreciate your heart and the way that you deliver your messages, your thoughts, and not messages as in sermons. I don't want to misspeak, but the way that you discuss topics and thoughts and theology, I think is great. So I would encourage everybody, again, go over, follow his channel on YouTube. He's got a Patreon as well, where he does like a reading club and everybody reads the same stuff. They're going through the church fathers. Not something that I would be opposed to doing someday myself. I don't know that I would go through the church fathers, but some other things, but that would be kind of a fun endeavor. Anyway, talk to you later. Have a great one. So it is Saturday, March 15th, 2025, getting close to midnight here. What a day. It was a whirlwind. Lots of great stuff. I had a bachelor party today, and my wife had a bachelorette party for my sister-in-law, who's getting married this upcoming month, and obviously her fiance. So my wife went with the ladies to get dinner and then watch a movie and just kind of do a stay-at-home fun girly evening, whatever they did with that. Aside from the movie, I'm not sure, but we went, the dudes, to an indoor race arena for like kind of electric go-karts, which was pretty cool. Went to a Chinese buffet that we all really enjoy, and then went out shooting at a local range, which was a blast. No pun intended, but worked out well there, I guess. In my update yesterday, I talked a lot about there's no such thing as neutrality, and kind of this element of everything you do is inherently in a realm that already exists. So like, that's why it's not neutral, because there's already this ontological reality we're tied into. Everything is not isolated in silos. Today, I had a lot of thought on intentionality, which kind of goes into that too. Like, you're going to be doing things that have effects in arenas, even if you would hope they wouldn't, if you would hope they would be neutral. But since that's not a reality, you need to be intentional too. One of the things I've been thinking a lot about in the last year and change is kind of where I'm reaping and sowing. So I've been trying to use the talents and abilities and experiences and gifts that God's given me and try to give them away freely. I mentioned, I think in the first week worth of vlog or whatever, right before my birthday, part of the way that I had been funding seminary was opportunities that the Lord had opened the door for me to do worship for money. Worship music and worship events and those sorts of things, where I had always just volunteered for free. I still always do. I never ask for any sort of payment to do those things. And then on the back end, a number of these opportunities ended up offering me payment. And I took that, put it in a fund, and that's what's been a significant chunk maybe even the biggest chunk of, I think the biggest at this point, chunk of where I've been saving for seminary. And that was kind of an open door of me just wanting to freely offer my gifts to serve in a way that's a little bit more formal ministry. But similarly, I've had some other things where I've just been trying to offer anything I do for free. You know, I make a lot of food for people when they're sick or for birthdays or those kind of things. And I've had a number of opportunities where people have offered over the last year out of nowhere again to pay me for those things. I'm even gonna do a wedding cake and cupcakes this summer from somebody who we used to go to church with who reached out to me, same sort of deal. I said I'd just be happy to do it and tell them how much the ingredients cost, and they said they want to pay me on top of that. I said whatever's on your heart, go for it. And I've had some other similar opportunities, or what I think may turn into opportunities. You know, I'm venturing into YouTube here. Funny enough, there's a channel I enjoy content of a lot called The Church Split. The gentleman's name is Will, who runs that channel, and he does some really good theological work in my opinion. And I've watched a lot of his videos, but I caught his live stream a few days back, and the audio was a little bit off. So he played an intro video with a bunch of backing music that was at a beautiful volume, and I was listening on my headphones at the store while grocery shopping. And then when he started to talk, his microphone was like way, way down. So I had to boost the volume on my phone a ton. And then he was responding to another gentleman's YouTube videos and commentary and kind of challenging some of his theological points. But every time he played a YouTube clip, all of a sudden that was way too loud in my ears. So his microphone was really, really low in comparison to the other things he was playing. And I threw a comment up there and said, hey, you know, your mic volume's low, just FYI. And he saw that and read it out loud on his stream, was like, oh, not again. So I guess he'd heard that before. And a couple folks in his comment section who I guess thought that I was kind of coming at him, started to yell at me and say, you're just deaf, or you don't know what you're talking about. And I sent him a separate message on Facebook just saying, hey, I'm that guy from the live stream who said your mic was quiet and everybody yelled at, but I actually have a background doing audio. I went to school for music. I'm on a worship team now. I have production experience. I even do a little bit of YouTube, and I know how this stuff works. I said, I just kind of explained to him the situation. I gave him like 3 recommendations of things to look into. Said, don't know if you've got a dynamic or condenser mic, but here's something you might want to look at. Not sure what streaming software you're using. You might want to check this thing out. And I mentioned a couple VSTs that might help him as well for audio plugins. And he actually just got back to me, I think yesterday, and said, hey, thank you so much. Like, I appreciate it. I don't know the audio side of this as well as some of the other elements. Being a YouTuber means you have to know a ton of stuff about a bunch of different areas. So I told him I'd happily help out. I said plainly in there, I'm not trying to sell you some service or whatever. I don't want any money from you. I just want to help another Christian whose content I enjoy get it out there better. But that could always be an open avenue as I start to do more of this YouTube stuff, to have somebody I can reach out to for feedback or recommendations or help, even if it's not a monetary thing. And then in a similar, vein, I kind of fortuitously had an opportunity come up where I was able to help a fellow that we go to church with his business. He's recently gone into business for himself doing construction, has no real background with spreadsheeting and different data elements, which I've done professionally for a number of years. So I just offered to help him out. He has a big quote due coming up here, and it's a bunch of back-to-back jobs if he wins this bid that he's putting out. So I said, hey, I actually have the morning free before I'm going to this bachelor party. My in-laws were watching our children, so I said, if you want to catch up, I'm happy to help you build out something in Excel that at least makes this a little more regular and systematized. And he took me up on that, and again, I just offered to do it to help out, and he ended up wanting to pay me a little bit, which at least went towards helping with some of the expenses of the bachelor party today. But those kind of things, I was just thinking about that, being willing to be generous and just give where you've got the ability and opportunity. Even in the weirdest places. Like, I think if you were to talk to a non-churchgoer, an unbeliever about being a generous Christian, they're going to think you're just talking about money and probably just giving money to causes that they may not like, or political causes even, when in reality, I think it's just what Scripture talks about, kind of dying to yourself and realizing that other people's needs and priorities should supersede yours to a certain extent. There's, different levels to which that applies, and different levels of immediacy that I think require more urgency. Your immediate family, at least as a man, you have to provide for, that's going to take precedence over some of the other arenas in which you can invest and be charitable. But, especially in this case, local people to us mostly, where I was able to go to this gentleman's house this morning and help him directly with the business that he's working in, supporting his family. And then a little bit less prioritized, I'll get to it sometime this week, Will over at the church split, who's doing his great theological work, but I don't even know where in the country he lives. So that was kind of what was really floating through my mind all day today, despite doing all the other cool activities, just really thinking about the number of times that a small little opportunity to be generous or to help out or just offer to bless somebody else has kind of come back in a positive reaping and sowing aspect, which Scripture is obviously very clear about. So I would encourage any of you who ever end up seeing this, or even if it's just me down the road reflecting, a reminder to be generous and focus on other people, and don't take for granted any of the things you've learned or the gifts that you have or the abilities you've garnered over the years. Give them away freely, help other people, bless other people with them, and it's a reaping and sowing thing that's going to pay off in ways you may never imagine. So that's probably a good way to end this for today. I've got some tea brewing for my wife. She's getting a little bit of a sore throat. Our kiddos have had kind of a little bit of a cold the last day or two, so gonna get her some tea before bed here, and then I'm getting up and playing guitar and singing tomorrow. See you later. Today was a little bit of a long one. Got up this morning for church with plenty of time to go. I was singing and playing acoustic guitar today, but my wife woke up with a cold. She kind of knew she was getting it last night. Our kids have had a cold on and off for a couple days. So she stayed home with them just to make sure they didn't spread anything throughout the nursery. I went to church and did our service, which went well. And then I had to kind of scramble back. Both of our kids have a little bit of a breathing issue when they get colds, so they sometimes have to use nebulizers with some medication. So we had to take care of that today, and with her being a little bit down for the count with her cold, I had to kind of try and pick up that slack a little bit. So it's just been a lot of catching up on some dishes and laundry and other things today, and I was pretty tired, feeling a little bit symptomatic from the same sort of thing. I normally don't really get anything for more than maybe 24 hours because I'm kind of religious about steaming and getting anything out of my body that needs to get out, and maybe taking a little bit of, cough medicine here or there or something like that. But I'm sure I'll feel better tomorrow, but definitely a little bit exhausted. Been snacking on a little bit of ice cream before bed just to take some of the edge off, I guess. Nothing like a little bit of chocolate and peanut butter before going to sleep. But anyway, service today was really, really good. Funny enough, I had this kind of last week with a thing, and then today. Last week, I have a lot of enjoyment when there's something that I kind of feel in my own spirit or in my own life and feel led in a particular direction, and then see that come to pass congregationally at our church. So last week when I was on for worship, we always do a pre-service prayer with some people who also are just there for prayer, and then whoever's going to be preaching is normally involved, and a few other folks who are key leaders before the service. And we were doing some corporate prayer, and then they kind of said, everybody just kind of pray on your own for a little bit. And for some odd reason, I just really felt compelled to pray the Lord's Prayer, which is not necessarily at all a regular thing that I do, maybe to my own detriment, but it's something I think, maybe in the more like mainline Protestant denominations and maybe other high church denominations is much more regular, but we don't do that at our church normally at all. So I was just praying the Lord's Prayer in that time of prayer to myself, and then when our pastor, who had been on sabbatical, came back and preached that same day on his message, which was really good, and went through some of Matthew 18, he also then was like, you know what, we need to do the Lord's Prayer as a congregation. So that was kind of one of those weird things that lined up unexpectedly, but in a good way. And then similarly today, the entire message was on giving, so to a certain extent on financial giving, but a lot more in the idea of that it's supposed to be more of a lifestyle of generosity in the new covenant, and some elements like that that basically lined up with what I said in my message last night. I guess these are messages now because it's Sunday, but when I was talking to camera last night, that's what I was saying is, I've been focusing on this element of intentionality of trying to serve people and just be a blessing to them wherever I have some sort of knowledge or skill set or opportunity of time and resources to offer, even if it's not financial. And then funny enough, that has been coming back to me in its own form, normally for some sort of funding for like seminary or something else like that. So that was a nice little, coincidence isn't really the word that I would like to use there. It's what's coming to mind at the moment, but maybe more of like a providence thing. I always feel encouraged when there's something I'm experiencing and feeling in my own spirit or in my own time of, reflection or reading through the word or something like that, or prayer, whatever it is, that then pops up at the same time in our congregational worship. So it is Sunday, March 16th, I guess. March 16th, and that makes yesterday the 15th, which I'm sure I said, but I also remembered yesterday was the Ides of March, and I jokingly at my job, we were sunsetting an old website, and I threw out March 15th, the Ides of March, to do that, and they accepted that. So that went yesterday by the wayside, so hopefully tomorrow when I get into the office and I'm doing some work, everything's fine with that, and transitioning everybody over to our new site. And then I'll be doing some video editing tomorrow for work. I have 2 little training videos I have to knock out that I have all the pieces for. Those should go quick. And then hopefully I'll get some time to really start to put together last week's video and audio. I'm going to be much faster after learning from the first video. I know right away need to make my proxies. I'm going to use a lot of the same animations as far as anything for the intro, anything for when I have the little call outs for what day it is. Any sort of quotes where there's like a pull up from the bottom that quotes whatever material. So I'm much more prepared for that. I already picked all the music out several days back, so that's all in there. And then I also have, if there's any particular songs I really like from the first video, I'll reuse those. I'm probably going to use the very first one that's with the intro to the video. I'm thinking I'm going to use that consistently, at least for a while. I like the way it opened. So we'll see if maybe that'll change if I find a better track or come up with a better idea. But I have been studying some tutorials over the last handful of days on better motion graphics and text things and getting some ideas, almost like I feel like if I can learn some key effects that I really like up front, it can give me some ideas of stuff to talk about. Almost like if I learn a particular type of motion graphic that fits with a certain text, then that text can be an element of an idea, maybe a chapter in a video or something. This is thinking probably less along the lines of this vlog, but more along the lines of doing some actual videos that are more based on theology, apologetics, whatever, for the other channel I intend to start, which would line up more with the writing I wanted to do online. So we will see how that goes, but I'm gonna have probably a couple more bites of ice cream and then go cash in for the night. So have a blessed sleep yourself. Good morning. It is Monday, March 17th, 2025. Happy Feast of St. Patrick's Day. Just reminded a little bit this morning, not some big celebration that we do in our house, and we're not a particularly liturgical family or go to a particularly liturgical church, although to some extent I'd like to change that, at least in our personal family. But St. Patrick, as tradition has it, was in Britain, like a Roman Britain guy, and he ended up getting stolen away into slavery into Ireland, was there for about a half a dozen years, I think, working as a shepherd, and then eventually found his way back to Britain. And he had found God while he was in slavery, and when he went back to Britain, became a priest, and then actually willingly went back to Ireland to try to convert the pagans there. Which is one of my favorite stories that I know of any formal saint, that you would be taken into slavery and then try to go back and redeem your captors because you recognize God's love for people who had that severely wronged you. And that's certainly an attitude I think we could use more in the contemporary world in general, being willing to strive to see the salvation of those who wrong us. But it has been an encouraging morning already. The gentleman who started our men's group that meets every other week texted me this morning just to check in, say hi. So we've had some good exchange. We've both got some great things going on in life. I told him a little bit about this channel. I still haven't told anybody formally the name of this channel or anything like that, so I'm just kind of keeping it to myself for the reasons of, I think initially it started off as like I wanted to see if the algorithm did anything with the videos. I don't think I have a single view on the first video, but I'm just going to keep it this way for a little while and see, and then maybe at some point open it up to let a couple folks know, like, hey, I did this, you know, if you want to check them out, give me some feedback. But I did tell him about this. He does a lot of music, far more than I even do, so he's got a music project going on that he's getting close to wrapping up, and some other things, which was great. And then there's another friend of mine on the worship team that we're hoping to get together and do lunch or coffee or some sort of thing like that, just to catch up more personally, so I reached out to him as well. But for the things I've been talking about the last couple days, I woke up this morning and I have the YouVersion Bible app as one of a couple Bible apps on my phone, and got the little update this morning of the verse of the day, and it was Jude 1:22, and it was talking about having mercy for those who waver, which I felt was a very timely and refreshing reminder to me. I've been talking a lot about intentionality in this video, and the fact that there's a certain, for me, kind of fiery impetus behind that, and that there's a lot of, I'm kind of an intense person, at least when it comes to ideas and theology and that, and expressing it, and I get very passionate about the things I come to believe because I spend a lot of time researching them and studying them and praying about them and all of that. So sometimes it can get really intense, and to the point where I will tend to be far more on the lacking side of mercy, or at least with patience, which all comes down to love. And that same chunk of the end of Jude, it's talking a lot about residing in the love of God while you're having that mercy. And same thing, you know, 1 Corinthians 13 is very famous for a wedding passage, but it talks about love is patient. So when I'm lacking in patience or mercy or any of these things, it's really an issue of me getting back into abiding in the love of God. That's something I have to constantly remind myself of. But with the different levels of intentionality and really working and striving to understand the reality God has created, and different ways that there's interplay between our life and His reality and all these things, I want to strive to have more patience and more mercy, and recognize that there is a whole sanctification process again, and then a maturing process that I've gone through over the years. I mean, I've been a Christian since 2012, and I'm sure I have a lot of grace for myself if I go back and look at things I didn't understand or didn't have time at that point to engage with, because I was so wrapped up in some of the fundamentals or basics. And there are certainly places I think that cause frustration duly with the state of the church or with individual people I know or meet, but that's not a reason to fall out of love or a position of love, or to just treat people poorly. So it was a great reminder for me, and even in doing these videos, this is kind of nice in the sense of it's convenient for not having pushback or not having to be interrupted or any of these kind of things. I just get to talk to a camera in some room, in this case my office, which is currently my favorite setup compared to the couch and a couple other places. But still, on the back end of this, I do hope to be doing things online with ministry of some sort. Again, not necessarily formal ministry, but putting up videos and apologetics and theology and discussing what might be hot button issues. And there's going to be people who want to engage, and having patience and respect and love and gentleness and engaging with those folks, even if they maybe don't return the favor. I'm a big fan of Dr. Gavin Ortlund's kind of methodology of triaging different scriptural issues or interpretive issues. He posted a video early this morning. I caught it when it was probably less than 20 minutes published, and listened to that while doing some work, and I enjoyed it a lot. He's got a great temperament. I think he's got a beautiful heart, and he's really loving in the things that he engages with, especially because a lot of people don't always return that favor again. And he had posted some things that, you know, he's constantly being accused of being a liberal for various reasons, just because of scriptural interpretations, like not necessarily believing in a young earth or an exact literal 7-day creation. And he just goes back and shows, look, this is a consistent thing in church history from multiple people who didn't hold this view, but they're still conservative, and they believe in the infallibility of Scripture and the full authority of Scripture and all these other points that we would say are, you know, lowercase o orthodox. And there's no reason to slander or demonize people just because they disagree on somewhat of a non-core or non-fundamental issue. God is the creator is the fundamental issue, not necessarily exactly the time frame or means by which he did the creating. And there's a lot of nuance there that maybe your average reader who, especially if they're a young believer, doesn't understand necessarily genre, context, the different kind of idioms or styles of writing in, say, an ancient context at all, let alone the Hebrew language, and that there are challenges with those things that are nuanced, and that people who have a genuine allegiance to God have believed different things on throughout time in the church. So I put a post on Facebook, I shared that video and said I thought it was excellent, and kind of shared a more expounded upon version of what I just said to camera here, that we need to stop demonizing and slandering and vilifying people who just remotely disagree with us. There needs to be a more formal way that we're trying to measure someone's authenticity of faith, but it should be something more along the lines, in my opinion, of like the Apostles' Creed or the Nicene Creed, where it's talking about these very fundamental elements of God as creator. He has a triune nature, Father, Son, Spirit. They share the same essence, and the elements of Christ's death, burial, and resurrection, and the forgiveness of sins, and those kind of very critical and foundational things, but it doesn't dogmatize all these elements of creation or what you believe about the flood and its geography, or maybe the nature of the Nephilim and all the other things. Soteriology, exactly what the what the means and mode of election are, or like the exact mechanisms of salvation, or the different eschatological views, all this kind of stuff that people want to fight over and declare somebody a heretic or an apostate for not agreeing with them. So I kind of put up my heart about that. Especially there's an element of philosophy there too, where I pulled out the no true Scotsman fallacy is something that runs rampant on the internet of, well, you know, Christians don't believe that XYZ. And then somebody goes, well, I'm a Christian and I do believe that XYZ. And they go, well, you're not a true Christian then. So we got to watch out for that kind of stuff. So I believe in ecumenicism at a certain level, that we are called to be unified as the body of Christ. And we're going to be unified, I believe, before he returns, at least to a substantial extent beyond what we are now. But it's going to be really hard to get there if people want to declare anyone who slightly disagrees with them, in a weird way making themselves the ultimate authority. But anyone who disagrees with them is now somehow completely a heretic or an apostate. So along with all that, coming back to Jude, I want to have mercy for people who waver in that, and maybe some of the motivation behind such fierce accusations of heresy and apostasy come from a place of not being super familiar with certain issues, or being caused to waver by the fact that a way you had interpreted something may not have been right. I think some folks, especially if it's the first time they may encounter that sort of challenge, will potentially go, well, maybe I misinterpreted the whole thing, and maybe even Christianity altogether is false. And that's one of the things that we have to create the right sort of environment. And I would say along the lines of how Gavin Ortlund does, have a better means and method of triage and engagement, and be much more peaceable and calm in those engagements. If you've never seen his YouTube channel, it's called Truth Unites. Highly recommended. One of the litany of favorite Christian channels that I have, I'm starting to mention on here, but I'd love to get to engage with him at some point in the future. I even mentioned though in my post, Calvinism is one of my least favorite forms of systematic theology, if not my least favorite, that I would still consider to be in the Orthodox camp. And Gavin is a Calvinist, and I still love him, and I still wouldn't try to write him off as an unbeliever or say everything that he doesn't, or everything that he believes and how he interprets must be off because we disagree over the Calvinist front of his belief system. So that was another little point that I wanted to throw out there. Is like, yeah, I'm trying to live this out myself too. So anyway, gonna go on. I got some video editing to do, not just for this, but I've got some to do a little bit later today for work. A couple little training videos, two training videos to knock out and send over to our web guys. And hopefully the rest of it's gonna be good. So we'll catch you on the flip side. Here we are, Tuesday, March 18th, 2025. Time is flying.
I am definitely behind on editing last week's vlog video, so I need to catch up on that today. We're supposed to have men's group tonight. Well, we do have men's group tonight, our bi-weekly one. I might go late to that and get a little bit of opportunity to catch up on the editing. My wife should be taking our kids to her parents just to visit. We do that normally at least once a week because they live pretty close and they're retired. So she's going to potentially take them down there because she doesn't like to be sitting at home alone when she doesn't have to when I'm doing something like men's group. Sometimes I take them to my parents or one of my parents at least when she's at her women's group as well. So not entirely unusual, but that might give me a window to try and catch up a little bit. I did film a little earlier this morning doing some actual video editing for my job. One of the training videos I was doing, I actually recorded the entire edit process just looking at me, not seeing anything on screen, but I don't know that anything good will come out of that. If we'll get any fun B-roll that I can use for anything, it'd have to be sped up. I mean, a lot of it is just me looking over this way at the screen and doing some editing using the mouse and the keyboard with my hands. You probably can't even see it, but I'll at least have a good timestamp on how long it takes me to edit a video. I have it down pretty quick at this point, a nice template, and most of the videos that we're doing for things like training on our website are super short. So they actually rendered, I did 2 of them. I only recorded the one rendered in 22 seconds and one rendered in 23 seconds. But I also finally got the opportunity to spend my birthday money yesterday. I just bought more resources on Logos, which shows that I'm kind of a nerd. And they also send me a birthday coupon for 20 bucks off, so that helped. But excited to delve into those with some of the things I'm continuing to study and research and preparing to write on. I'm looking forward to that. One of the things I'll have to talk about on here at some point is charging for Christian resourcing and not. I watched a video on the Good Berean YouTube channel, which I've mentioned here on my first video, but kind of contrasting 2 points out there about whether it's okay or not to charge for different things with education, which is a very interesting and nuanced topic that I don't think anyone's doing a really good job nuancing right now. But anyway, the last interesting thing I watched an interview, or most of it, I haven't quite finished yet, but Rick Beato is a really good YouTube music education guy, and I've enjoyed a lot of his stuff. I went to school for music, so much of what he talks about I know as far as music theory, and I've also done production work, not professionally like him or anything like that. We're not remotely on the same level, but the number one thing I've learned from him is some more advanced jazz theory and things like that. But his interviews are also really cool because he talks to some of the biggest names in music, and he did one with the film composer Hans Zimmer. And so I was watching that yesterday a little bit, doing some dishes, I believe was my chore of choice while listening to that podcast. And I was really encouraged at one point because it reminded me of some of my thoughts on the church at large, but especially doing music worship stuff. But he was talking about how he can create things entirely in a digital audio workstation with samples and these full orchestrations and beautiful, exactly how he wants them, arrangements and compositions, but it's missing the not only humanity of people kind of doing it live, but the input and sort of blossoming that comes out of a creative work and an artistic work by having other people involved in their little bits of even intangible contribution to those things, and that it's this very sort of almost organic is like the cliche word that people would use, but almost a supernatural element, which I would say is probably true with us being image bearers of God. But that's how I feel sometimes with needing to remind myself to do things a little bit more in community. So I write some worship songs. I mentioned that again in the first video, I think, and I would like to put some of them out. I'm pretty controlling on the content and lyrics side because I want to make sure that I'm not putting out some sort of song that I would have theological disagreement with, and I am a very nuanced person with those things. But I'm not necessarily the best musician or composer, or nor am I the guy with all the answers or all the creativity in the world. So there's some folks I think I should probably be reaching out to within my own immediate community, and then maybe even beyond that at some point to try and collaborate more and do it even from a place of almost like forcing humility as a as a practice in my life. So those are kind of all the thoughts floating around my head this morning. I'm going to be going into the office for some meetings here shortly after lunch finishes. I'm on my break here. I've got to get my kids some lunch. They just got back from our local library where they like to hang out a little bit, get them fed, get over to the office, and then maybe tonight after group or something, I might have an update. Otherwise, catch you tomorrow. Here we are on the couch again, a little bit after midnight, which makes it Thursday, March 20th, 2025. Last night was worship rehearsal at our church. I'm not on this week. I'm actually leading in another church, which I do once a month for our friends who pastor over there. But we had our worship meeting, which is a monthly thing, and that went very well. And we had some good time of prayer together and community and worship that we do before the rehearsal. But also we got to announce to the group that we are doing the Path of Presence book as a group study. So that'll be happening. I think we're looking to do that starting in May, if I recall what our worship director said. And then we'll do like a section of the book per month, which is 5 sections. So we'll do it for about a half a year, because I think we're looking at maybe skipping July with people being on vacations or whatnot. But excited to be moving forward in that direction. And then I'm also almost done editing the second video. I had a bunch of stuff in the schedule that caused me to delay getting editing done on the video. I got all the music and other things in place, but the editing flew by this time. Pretty much knocked it out in one day. There's a few other pieces I want to wrap up real tightly, but mostly I just need to do the thumbnail again, so I anticipate being fully completed with that tomorrow, which is only one day later in the week than last week, with several more days of footage and a couple other things that I would consider improvements and enhancements that I'll still get it out within one day of what I did last week. So continuing to grow there, happy about it. Even saw that I got some engagement on YouTube, which I didn't anticipate. I got one person who left a comment, and I believe they also subscribed. So I haven't really been checking it, kind of on purpose, and also somewhat just because I have personal YouTube that I'm logged into on my phone. So I don't have this other kind of nameless account on my phone. It's a lot harder for me to check. But I'm gonna have to adjust that, and if I'm going to be getting engagement on these videos, I want to stay on top of that and thank people for the communal element of this. I just wasn't anticipating it so soon. Also wanted to touch on the fact that I had a really good men's group meeting Tuesday evening. We talked a lot about the pragmatic side of living life as a Christian man and husband and father. I think universally, well, not quite. There were 1 or 2 single guys there. Everyone else there is married and with children. So a lot of that conversation focused around finances and job challenges or business challenges and some other things like that, which was fresh on my mind as well. I mentioned earlier in this week worth of clips that I saw some not very nuanced conversation online from very different perspectives on Christians and finance. A lot of that was surrounding ministry to an extent, but to me it's very much like a whole life thing or not, because I don't particularly share the perspective that ministry is this wholly siloed thing from the rest of your life when you're living as a disciple of Jesus. There are elements obviously of full-on formal ministry. I would never believe in charging people to hear the gospel message or be preached to or things like that, but there's some big nuances that are immediately outside of that boundary that people get really, really heated on and don't seem to speak about very nuanced. But anyway, it was good to be around this circle of gentlemen that were dealing with that in a very wholesome and very calm manner, and trying to be open and understanding and provide insight and recommendation where they had some level of experience or expertise even. So really encouraged about that. Just having a solid community of men who are looking to pour into one another and try to help each other network and just volunteer even their own time and resources to make things happen. So very encouraged by that, and encouraged again by getting some engagement on YouTube and just a few other things like that. I do feel like the video for the second vlog is going to be a little bit more of a lame duck than the first one, just because it is really me sitting on this couch a ton and just talking at the camera. So on the level of discipline and continuing to do a clip or 2 every day and document this process and my thoughts, great. But on the level of content, it's certainly inspiring me to try to up my game and start to think about other places I can go and do this and ways I can be a little bit more mobile. I really haven't delved into, I have a little action cam and a couple other setups that I think I can probably make work, and I need to really engage that. So tomorrow I will finish this video, well, finish the video for last week and get that posted on YouTube, get a couple other things ready for the week. I have to get my worship set sent over to the church that I'll be leading at this Sunday so they can get it printed in their bulletin and all that. It'll be a busy day, but it'll be good. And then I have a Christian kind of business men's interest group meeting for the first time on Friday, and I'll be fishing Saturday morning with my dad. Not sure if I'm going to try to risk filming that or not, but we'll see. Until the next update, have a great one.